not really sure if we're on air. This is the weird thing about radio, Shayne, is I don't really know if we're actually on air. So we're talking, and I've got a feedback loop here out to our audience to make sure that we're indeed on air. So if you can hear us, we will do the show. If you can't, we'll start over maybe or catch you up. But welcome in. It is National German Chocolate Cake Day and also Corn on the Cob Day. Between those two, Shayne, what do you prefer here?
So I do enjoy German chocolate cake. I don't get it often, but I do enjoy it. But also a good buttered, salty corn on the cob is hard to beat as well.
Well, when's the last time you had German chocolate cake? That had to be a while.
I don't remember.
Yeah,
I've had corn on the cob more since then. So, but I'm always happy when I see it. When I'm at a cookout or when I'm at, whatever, dinner where people serve it. I don't know if it's ever been served in my house personally, but whenever I go places and they have it, I actually really enjoy it. So,
well, now we did a Thanksgiving draft of food here on a previous show, and I think we had corn on the cob. We had either corn on the cob or corn casserole. I think I made it one corn option as far as the sides go, and because I think I ended up with that corn casserole.
I don't know if I've ever had corn casserole.
See, that's one of my favorites. My mom, who sometimes is in studio with us, but is not here, but she has confirmed that we are indeed on the radio, Shayne. She's our reporter in the field right now.
Okay, great.
So they are hearing us, but we have that pretty much every year. It's basically just like corn, a thicker corn. I would think you would have had that in your area.
I've had different types of cornbread where some was a little more like sticky and sweet, and I've had some where it was more like a very bready bread, if that makes sense. I don't really know how to explain it. So when I see corn casserole, I guess I don't know what corn and cream, probably some cream of something, soup was probably involved in that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't, it's almost like more the consistency of like stuffing. It's like got stuff in between the corn.
Okay.
And it's more kind of bready. Like you said, it's probably like the combination, it's the step between just the corn kernels and cornbread. Mm-hmm. It's like loose cornbread.
I'll have to, if that's ever on the menu somewhere, I'll have to accept that as a possibility.
Yeah, I would think in some of those southern food joints, soul food kind of joints, that would be a popular one for the sides. But I'm thinking maybe we only have one guest, but we may have to go favorite way of having corn. So is your favorite way corn on the cob, Shayne? Your favorite way to?
Yeah, I've also, if you've had it, kerneled or whatever you call it, like cut off the cob or whatever.
Yeah, corn off the cob. I like that it's corn on the cob as opposed to corn off the cob.
Yeah. So that is something that I like it like that. I like it in some, I guess, like picos or salsa or something.
Yeah. Like
for
a
the
black bean salsa kind of thing with
corn. For the most part, though, I don't know. I remember as a kid eating it a lot, like kind of, I guess, out of a can. And then corn on the cob. But growing up, we had corn on the cob all the time because it was a cheap way to get it and it was easy to make. I think we boiled it or something like that. I've actually, a long time ago, grilled it, but it's not something that I regularly do.
Yeah, grilled. Oh, okay, grilled corn on the cob. Yeah, that's becoming more popular, I feel like.
Yeah,
to have it grilled like that. So yeah, that's a good way. And then I know, because have you ever had elote?
No.
It's like a Mexican corn, and they put like some spices, and there's I don't think it's sour cream. It's like a butter mixture that goes on there. That's very good. It's just basically like they dressed up the corn for you. You don't have to roll it in the butter, because that's always the difficult part. When you have the corn, you have to roll it, you got to roll it with those little tines in the butter and stuff.
Yeah. Or find a way to move the butter over top of it without rolling it.
Yeah, exactly. But then you're touching the butter, and then other people have to use it, and all that. I'm getting a report from our reporter in the field that it's corn muffin mix plus regular corn and cream cheese. That is the contents of her corn casserole.
All right.
So there's that. But yeah, we'll ask Jeremy in the 8 o'clock hour what his favorite corn is. But we got some things to talk about. I don't know where you want to start here, Shayne, but we've got one of the things, we always talk about people potentially returning to the NFL and kind of having something left in the tank. We talked about that with Brady. I mean, Joe Flacco's still kind of hanging around. Phillip Rivers came back. And these guys, I was wondering kind of when guys, especially near your era, you played on the same team as Tom Brady. Rivers is on the older side here, but Aaron Donald is considering a return, especially now that he has Myles Garrett in the fold here with the Rams. And I'm curious how you take that in, because especially for a defensive lineman, I'm thinking about this from the perspective of a lineman in general. They've got to keep a certain weight to play in the NFL. And a lot of those guys, I don't know. I know you're good friends with Frosty Rucker. I don't know how it went for Frosty and some of those guys, but a lot of the guys that I see after they get out of the NFL, it's like they stop doing the eating program and all of a sudden they're skinny. Joe Thomas went from being premier left tackle, hefty, strong, big, massive, to normal everyday guy. He was just a little tall.
Yeah, and there's a guy, I can't remember his name. He played in Baltimore. He had red hair. I'm blanking on his name. Don't know why. But when he retired, he became a fitness model.
Okay.
And kind of got into like the bodybuilding world.
What position was he?
He was an offensive lineman.
Okay.
I just can't remember. His name is just completely blanking on me right now. But I know a lot of guys, even some of my college teammates that were super, super heavy back in their playing days and just huge men. And then all of a sudden they're 220. A good friend of mine that played at Miami of Ohio, I think he always described it as he had a cup of coffee in the NFL. His name was Mark Staten. He was a coach with me at Michigan State, and he coached at Toledo and I think he coached at a couple other places. But he's now out of coaching, but he is, a 6'7", big guy, but he was an offensive lineman, and he's like 215, 220, and looks great, and in some of the best shape he's been in. But, a lot of those guys, they get out of their training and their diet and their regimen, and it's kind of hard for them to get back to playing weight if they were to do it quickly after their career ended.
Yeah, it is wild to me because, I mean, I'm just kind of thicker in general. I think my frame's meant to have a little bit more weight, and you would think that for some of these linemen, because it's like, well, they carried 350 pounds or whatever. Then you see them after they're just kind of eating normally and not training, and it's like, well, maybe not. Maybe they were actually meant to be kind of skinny.
Well, it's funny. I've heard trainers and doctors talk about this, that you'd be surprised when you see some of these big men. If you were to see the x-rays of their skeletal configuration, they're really just normal. You'd think they'd have bigger bones to sustain, kind of all that weight, and they'd be bigger framed, but they're not always like that. You'll find sometimes people maybe built a little, maybe their shoulders are a little broader. Usually the really good swimmers naturally have, broader shoulders and longer arms, but that may be something that they kind of, because they had that, oddity in their frame, made them better at swimming. So they ended up excelling through all the levels of it. But, obviously these offensive linemen and D linemen, other guys, they make it because they have the physical attributes that give them the size, but it's not always, I just found it interesting when they were showing me some x-rays, and it was like, wow, that femur or whatever was no different looking than anyone else's. They just had a lot of girth on the outside with muscle and fat and things like that.
Yeah, the nutrition programs are really interesting to me in the NFL. We've talked about that a little bit, like because you have to go both directions sometimes. Sometimes you gotta increase it a little bit. You come into camp a little light, and then sometimes maybe you're on the other side and you gotta get on the scale a little bit more often and lay off of some things. But I think it's probably more the former, right, Shayne? It's probably more having to bulk up typically than to take weight off, especially for a lot of these linemen.
When they're playing, they're given a 10-pound window.
Okay.
And the strength coach usually comes up with, this is the window that works for you. This is where we want you. And so you have 5 pounds of heavy and 5 pounds light that you're allowed to play in with your weight. And then that's when they start fining you when you are too light or too heavy. We typically hear it about some skill position guys or big skill guys being a little too heavy, but every now and then you'll get a lineman that they say, hey, you got to gain some weight. You're losing too much weight. Typically happens in the off season. Maybe they want to look good at the beach. Maybe they want to look good at the pool or whatever. And there are some guys, and it's typically been defensive linemen that have been told, hey, you got to lose weight. The offensive linemen, they really don't get on them too much, but I think they're already big guys. It's usually the D linemen that they want them to kind of get their weight down so they can be a little faster versus being heavier and being able to anchor as a lineman. As an offensive lineman, you got to kind of be heavy and anchor, whereas a defensive lineman, you have to be fast enough and quick enough and powerful enough to get around a guy. So that's usually why they want those guys to lose weight more than gain weight.
A 10-pound window is actually that's smaller than I would have thought.
Yeah. And well, I mean, you're talking about a business where, there's a lot of finite details that go into it, and they hold you very, very accountable to that. I mean, it used to be $900 per pound per day if you were overweight.
Woof. Yeah.
And what ended up happening is guys were getting in the sauna to try to sweat off weight before weigh-ins, and guys started passing out. Guys like Corey Stringer were taking the ephedra and the fat burners, and guys were passing out, and in Corey Stringer's case, he passed away. Those issues became such a thing that the NFLPA was able to get it passed through that the teams could not weigh you every single day. There was only going to be one weigh-in per week, and they could fine you whatever the schedule was for the fine during that one weigh-in. That was good, but you couldn't do it every day because the closer you got to game day, you don't want guys malnourishing themselves getting closer to game day.
That would throw off the routine, I'm sure, having the proper nutrition. They were just talking about that on the Tigers broadcast, actually, talking about like the way that I thought of you because they talked about the pickle juice. They use the pickle juice as well in baseball there. But I guess with the 10-pound thing, I'm not confused that it's that precise, but how do they determine that? Like, how much of a feedback loop is there?
Well, the conversation happens usually with the strength coach and the player. And he says, do you like where you're at? Do you feel like you work better, heavier, work better, lighter? What do you feel like? And then the player gives their feedback, but then the strength coach also might realize like, okay, maybe he's saying that to protect his weight a little bit, or I think I can get 5 pounds off of him, or I think I can add 5 pounds, or whatever it can be. So they come up to an agreement on what that weight is. And then that's when they do the weigh-ins. I think it's Wednesday morning when they do that weigh-in. It's like, hey, I got fined twice in my career for being over my weight.
That's interesting because for a kicker, and we've talked about this a little bit because this is one of my favorites, and I know you've talked with him and stuff. The thicker kicker, Harrison Mevis, I liked him. I liked his energy in college, and then he's gotten a chance in the pros now, which is nice. But with a kicker, you've talked about that. That's an interesting subject. How I think a lot of people would go, well, what does it really matter, right? Because you're not having to be extra fast. We're not worried about agility. We just need you to make those few steps to the ball. And as long as you're comfortable and you're at your cadence, then that's good enough. But you've had some interesting information on this.
And I've actually had coaches that told me, we don't care what your weight is. You do you, whatever you need to do. As long as you're putting the ball through the uprights, then we don't care what your weight is. So there are going to be some coaches that are probably like, hey, it doesn't matter. Don't starve yourself during the season. Don't do all that. It can be maybe an off-season, project to lose some weight if somebody's heavy. But a lot of teams aren't going to kind of hold the kicker to the fire, because that weight is, you're not using it against other people. Whereas all the other positions, when it comes to their weight, being light or heavy, depends on how they interact when they're fighting against another player across the line of scrimmage. Whereas a kicker, you're not doing that. Now, they don't want guys to get obese and get, because I'm sure if that happens, you're probably out of training as it is, and you're not really keeping yourself strong enough to do the skill that you're doing. But I definitely see where it kind of becomes a little bit of a free pass.
Well, but when you were doing it, there was I guess what I would wonder about, because when you're lifting weights, you have to be able, when you're heavier, you have to be able to, you're able to push up more for a bench press. Like, even if it's not muscle, heavier people typically have a little bit better ability because of the mass. Would that help or hinder that kind of swing of the kick? I feel like it would limit flexibility, but would it generate any more power?
I don't think it will, but I can also tell you that I remember one time when I lost a bunch of weight in college. I'd got up to like 210, and then I got down to 190 all in one off season, and I felt like I lost strength with it. But the thing that happens is when people lose weight, you lose muscle with it. And that's why, the art and the sport of bodybuilding is such a, challenging thing, is because most people don't have the discipline or the motivation to, one, lift and work as hard as those guys work to get their size. Some guys don't have the resources of certain drugs and things like that some guys may use, but they also have a very, very, very strict regimen of eating, and so they can gain muscle and not gain fat. And it's really hard to gain one without the other. It's just really hard. So some, bodybuilders have what they call bulking season. So that's when they're trying to gain as much muscle as they can, but they also gain fat. And then right before their competitions, they cut. So when they cut, it's almost like they know they're going to lose a little bit of muscle, because they're kind of cutting calories or carbs or whatever, they're using to cut, and they end up losing a little bit of muscle. So they try to stack on as much as they can during their bulking phase. And with football players, we see guys who look like bodybuilders and stay like that year round. Some of them are natural freaks, and some of them just work out enough and eat the right way to kind of keep things as they are. But it becomes very complicated when you lose too much weight. You can definitely lose some muscle mass with that. So you're going to lose some strength. And usually if you're a heavier person, you've probably got some muscle underneath of it, even if you're not even lifting that much, because you're used to carrying around the extra weight. So that in itself is probably giving you certain things that are stronger if you're at least a little bit active. But then you got to worry about atrophy and bone density and things like that down the road.
I learned about the bulking and cutting when I was in my heavy weightlifting phase. I just never really got to the cutting part, Shayne. That was the problem. I was just in the bulking phase. But we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back, and I want to talk about this Brandon Sorsby issue with Shayne, because it's setting an interesting precedent for college football here. We were talking about that before the show went live. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. coming back in studio here with Shayne, and I wanted to get his take on this because this is an ever evolving issue. So it's going to be a tough thing to kind of wrap our heads around. But we've been talking about this Brandon Sorsby issue. I feel like this is karma for me, Shayne, because this is an IU guy. He was an IU quarterback when he was doing a lot of this stuff. So we won the college football championship, but then now we've got this gambling issue. But he's on Texas Tech currently, so he's I guess currently their problem. But he's for those that don't know the story, he placed thousands of bets. I don't think they even fully know how many. So if it's thousands, is that over?
I thought I saw like 10,000.
Yeah. Well, and if they know of thousands, you got to kind of assume, yeah, exactly, that it's maybe in the 5 digits, like you said. And he then was basically penalized by the NCAA, kind of, and then he ended up checking himself into rehab. Most of the football people that I've talked with have decided that was probably he was probably invited to do that, to get himself into rehab. But now he was then suspended for the season and then challenged that in court. And I thought, well, there's no way they're coming back from this, right? The times that this has happened in the other sports, Jonte Porter, I believe was his name, did this in the NBA, and he got basically banned for life pretty much immediately as soon as they found out and had the proper evidence. It's also happened in baseball. And so I thought, man, this guy may never play football again. Turns out it's going to be a 2-game suspension for him. And we were talking about this at the beginning of the show. It's an interesting precedent because this is the first ruling of its kind. So now anytime this happens, this is the watermark. So the other courts, it doesn't matter if you're in Texas or in Tennessee or Michigan, wherever you are, they're going to refer to that court case. So I'm curious kind of how you take this in. You were in college. You didn't have to worry about the gambling thing. You didn't do the gambling. Wasn't as prominent back then anyways. But it's an interesting precedent now that gambling is so common.
It's crazy to me because there's such weird, stupid rules that the NCAA has. I think we talked about you can put out bagels, but if you put cream cheese out,
that one cracks me up.
It's impermissible, right? Like that's the actual term, is impermissible. I saw an example on a social media post of a team that put out like a big cookie or some sort. And because the cookie had icing on it, it became impermissible because it had icing on the cookie.
Wait, what is that? Okay, the bagel thing I think was because that made it breakfast, right? When it was cream cheese, it made it breakfast. What does icing on a cookie mean?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Dessert? I don't know. But because it had icing on it, or maybe it was something for recruits, and they said there was too much icing. I really don't remember the exact wording. I just remember it was considered impermissible. And then there was a story about, a few years ago, a guy that actually turned himself in on one bet. And
interesting.
And ended up getting suspended for his final year and basically kind of ruining his whole pro prospect chance. And he was a good player. So it's crazy that they go back and do different things. I mean, think about Reggie Bush, having his Heisman taken away from him. USC having to vacate their national championship and all the kind of stuff that they went through because he let someone fund a suit to wear to the Heisman show. And I'm sure other stuff was happening, and I think we all know other stuff happens. But now you've got guys making millions of dollars, and you've got backups making $100,000. Like I heard about some backups that were making tons of money, and guys that weren't even role players making tons of money that any of us would have loved to have had when we were in college, because we would have felt like we, even on scholarship, I can tell you a funny story. We had a certain time of the year that we would pull up the cushions on the couch and look for quarters. And that meant we had an extra night of drinking beers on the town because we had some extra money. And even with a scholarship, you never really had a lot of extra money for social stuff. It paid all your bills, and you were essentially, but we weren't allowed to have jobs at the time. They allowed us to have jobs in the off season at a certain point, but we were not allowed to work during school year, and we were not allowed to work during the season. So there was no extra money, and I can promise you my family did not have extra money coming in. So, there were the federal loans and the things that we could get certain assistance for people that qualified. But that time when we pulled those couch cushions out and got those, maybe $6 and change, we could go buy a case of beer with that back in the day. So it was worth it for us.
Well, I thought you were going to say for the washing machine, the quarters were for that. But so when you say it paid all your bills, what did it actually pay for, the scholarship?
So scholarship would pay tuition. It would pay a certain amount for room and board. Now, what we would do is try to find somewhere that we could get the rent that fell underneath of that, so we could have a little bit of that money in our pocket. We had a meal plan, and if you lived off campus, that meal plan translated into, you got, I think, one meal on campus a day, and then you got the amount of money that it would have cost for 2 more meals on campus you got in your pocket.
So a couple things were stipends in there.
Kind of stipends, yes. Yep. But they were given in, quarterly or semesterly amounts. And that's how that money came to us. And then all we had to do was just go to the bookstore. We were on a list. We got our books. We got all that stuff taken care of. And then if there were other things that we needed, there were different forms we had to fill out. Like we were actually... and I qualified for it because I was, I think it was within what's called a Pell Grant. So I qualified for special assistance, and I could actually get reimbursed for certain things. So like a computer or software or something, we could get reimbursed as long as it was something we could prove that was a school related thing. And then there was one thing that was always my big treat, and that was my $1,200 that I could get for clothes.
Oh, okay.
So we got $1,200 for clothes. And in today's world, that's really not that much money. But, in the mid-'90s, that was a good amount of money. So I felt like that was, I was very fortunate for that. Maybe I could have bought less clothes with that money and used it for other things. But then I wouldn't have gotten the money because I had to get reimbursed for it. I had to show the receipts that I actually had purchased it. And there were actually, stories around the country of guys kind of taking advantage of that, where people would, I think Florida State got in trouble for it with Peter Warwick and Lavernius Coles. I think they went and got all this stuff in a receipt and only had to pay a few dollars for it. And then they turned those receipts in and were getting, extra money for that. And that was kind of I think it was Dillard's or whatever was kind of like the scandal at the time. So it's interesting. I mean, we all know what it was like in college to not have money, and now these kids just have money that, I don't even know what you would do with.
Well, that's the big thing about the gambling and everything that's going on. There's a lot of opportunity there. You've got NIL, you've got the ability to gamble. I just saw an ad that DraftKings is in all 50 states now. So now you can't even limit yourself by the state that you play in. There were some states that it wasn't available in. And I mean, it is very easy. I'm not a gambler. I stay away from those apps, but it is very easy to download that app and place a bet on it. Yeah. I have seen that because I've seen friends do it, and I have downloaded the app just to look at it, and it is very easy.
And who's to stop these guys from? And maybe this is what some of these guys got caught doing. Making ghost accounts or having your buddy do it, and y'all have an arrangement where you get the profit or whatever it may be. I don't know. Who's stopping those guys from doing that? I mean, it's like anything that you ban and make illegal, people are going to find a way to do it. I mean, as far as I know, there are certain drugs that are definitely illegal, but you still hear about it happening all the time.
Well, you were talking about basically having some sort of cutout or system going with those Florida State folks back in that day, because I remember some things happening. It wasn't the same issue, but I remember that happening with Aaron McPherson. I don't know if you remember him. He was in college about the same time. I think maybe a little bit earlier than those guys. I ended up meeting him here, and playing basketball with him and stuff here locally because he played for the Rampage for a few years, the Grand Rapids Rampage. But yeah, you can easily supplant that and have a cutout and either submit false receipts in the example of the clothing, or just say, hey, friend, I'll take you to the store, you can pay me, and then here's the receipts, and then they bought all their clothes.
I mean, no different than the people, the hey mister people outside the gas stations. Hey mister, can you buy me a beer? I heard stories about that happening. Never saw it myself personally, but I think there's all kinds of ways that people can learn to rig the system to get around things. I mean, I've even heard of NFL players. Okay, so we have this thing called an HRA, health reimbursement account. For every year that you played in the NFL, they put this certain fixed amount of money into an account that can only be used for health care because our insurance runs out after we retire. So we either have to get our own insurance or we COBRA through what we have, and then we have to pay for the premium through our HRA or however. But, you play quite a few years, you've got a couple $100,000 in this account that you can't touch unless it's for health reasons. So what guys were doing, and they got caught, and they actually got real tight on this now, is buying like a hyperbaric chamber.
Okay.
And then returning it.
Oh, okay.
So they'd send in the receipt and get the however many $1,000 it was for that, or some sort of a crazy medical type thing, and all of a sudden they're getting these big checks, and these guys got caught, and it's like you just people are going to find a way to hedge the system one way or the other.
Well, I'm going to stay on this path. We got to take a break, but I want to stay on this path because there was just recently another, it seems like we're talking about the courts and fraud a decent amount this episode, so we'll stay on theme, but there were 5 law firms that were found culpable in a scheme to help people get reimbursed through the concussion protocol for the Players Association there. So that's kind of in this same ballywick there. So we'll talk about that after the break. Stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Coming back here in studio, we're having a Law and Order themed show today. It seems like maybe I've been watching the NBA Finals too much because they've had Benson and Stabler, characters from Law and Order, on the sideline for a lot of the Knicks games here recently. So I might that might have seeped in a little bit. But this is interesting to me since we're talking about the fraud. I read this report here, I think today actually, about a few law firms that were trying to basically take advantage of the settlement and the funds that were available for the CTE protocol for the NFL for guys that were suffering from different things, CTE, and I believe other injuries as well. And I just met with a player, actually a former player, I won't say his name, but that was kind of struggling with this very thing. So it's kind of sad to see because he's an older player. He didn't play in the era where they really had very high pay, so he wasn't able to really save a lot of money, and he's had some issues with some of his injury history and the concussions and different things, and he's been trying to see doctors to try to confirm this, and he's flown around the country trying to figure this out, and he hasn't been able to really get to the settlement piece. So you have that side of things that happens, and I've heard that from players. But then unfortunately you have the other side, which is lawyers and different folks taking advantage of the system and sometimes unknowingly getting players involved and then getting compensation that the players weren't even aware that they weren't supposed to get, because the compensation is supposed to be there, but obviously you have to follow a certain protocol with it.
Yeah, and what happens is there are some of these people that are legit and they're trying, it's a legitimate business. Yes, they're going to take a fee and all that, but they're trying to help guys. But greed always comes into it, and what you end up finding is that some of these, whether they're law firms or whatever background they are, they do all the heavy lifting. They do all the collecting documents from all the teams and doing all the things they need to get to make everything official. and then they do a lot of stuff for you, but they have a really hefty percentage fee or a flat fee, and that's how they make their money. So the more guys they get, so they've actually got handlers that are out there on social media. Every former player, they ask them if they've collected like line of duty pay or neurocog pay or any of that stuff, and they try to recruit you in and tell you like, hey, I don't know if you've ever tried to get this yet, but you know, if you've got any injuries or anything you've gone through, like we can probably help you get this much money and this much, you know, all these things. And some of them are very, very aggressive and really go after a lot of guys, but they're also aggressive in the style that they try to push it past the board of doctors and people that are kind of overseeing this. They're very aggressive, and you know, it's almost like they, you know, push the boundaries as much as they can so they can collect as many fees as they can. And it's helped a lot of guys. I will say there are a lot of guys that maybe didn't get through the system on their first one or two tries, and these guys have really helped them get through the system so they can, you know, be able to help themselves. But sometimes when that happens, it changes the protocol to where they make it harder to get through the system, and guys that really deserve it are having a hard time sometimes because they've tightened the protocol with how it happens. I mean, just prime example, for certain injuries, you know, if you get a certain amount of points based on the number of injuries you have that were from your playing days, you qualify for this certain type of almost like a pre-pension pension. So they find these points and they have to qualify each body part that has an injury. And if you stack the points up over a certain level, you qualify. Well, it used to be you could do MRIs, X-rays, everything. Well, for some reason, they stopped using MRIs because guys that, you know, maybe had certain injuries that MRI shows the, you know, long-term effects of that injury, they weren't able to, you know, I think more guys were getting it, and they wanted to, the league wanted to crack down on how many guys were qualifying. So they said MRIs don't count. We can only use X-rays now, which a lot of us as players were like, well, that's not fair because X-rays aren't going to pick up soft tissue damage. It's only going to pick up, you know, skeletal damage or maybe some ligament stuff. So it's made things harder because certain guys push the limits so hard. And that becomes, you know, kind of a gray area because, you know, they're pushing the limits with guys that really probably deserve it and probably trying to push the limits with guys that are borderline, but it's for them to get more of a fee schedule, I guess. And it just ends up being a bad look. So it makes it tougher on everybody.
It is a tough situation because there's a lot of legitimate need for it, especially like my friend that I met with that, you know, yeah, he doesn't have a lot of money laying around. You know, he played in the 70s and 80s. He was, they obviously had worse equipment back then and didn't have the ability to really save a lot of money for the different medical procedures now. And so, yeah, he's just trying to say, he's just trying to use the system. Like, hey, can I get some of this refunded because I have some medical issues? And he's not going very grandiose with it. But like you said, the bad apples tend to spoil the bunch in those kinds of cases sometimes.
Yeah, and I know one thing. The union is the players' union is trying to get, especially for a lot of the older, you know, former players, is health coverage that extends longer beyond their career because so many guys end up having hip replacements and knee replacements and fused, you know, spines and different things that they're having to go through because of the degenerative injuries they had when they played, and they only get worse as they get older. And these guys are all dealing with it later on in life when some of them really didn't make much money. I mean, you talked about your friend, but there's people that played that had to work two jobs because the pro football didn't really pay that much money back then.
Oh yeah, and he played he played in the era where he was telling me a story about trying to re-sign for a contract, and it was basically like, here, you can take this or nothing, because free agency wasn't really a thing. It was harder for those guys to move teams. It's nothing like it is now. And so you want to see those people be able to take advantage, not take advantage in a bad way, but take advantage of the benefits that they were offered and promised, and not see others take advantage of the system.
Yeah, and I mean, you can probably thank Reggie White for that, because he was the big catalyst in creating a free agent system so that players couldn't be taken advantage of and held on to and not compensated based on their value. He was a really big part of that. I think that was part of the whole player strike in, was it 81 or 82, whatever year that strike was. I think he was a big part of that. And it really helped out a lot of guys. But I think when you look at what some guys had to go through, and the rules are trying to protect the players from some of these massive hits and concussions, but it's also on their body parts, because, you might not know about your concussion issues until well down the road. And many guys, unfortunately, pass away before they even knew about it. But, you think about all the guys that just have their fingers are so gnarled up, and their joints and all the aches and pains they go through on a daily basis, because they got beat up so much when they played. And it's easy for the average person to say, well, he chose that and he got to get paid all this money to do that. That's easy to say, but they're still human, and pain still affects everybody. And when your body starts to break down, it doesn't matter how much money you have. Sometimes your body's breaking down. And so I definitely sympathize with a lot of those guys that are going through that, especially the older guys. But you hate to see people take advantage of it.
And that argument is more true now than it was, as far as like, well, they're getting paid for it, and then they're getting compensated. Yeah, not really that fairly back in the day, because the contracts have risen so much.
And you can even make this argument, and I always make this comparison, because I do tend to feel like, as a football player, I don't think we deserve what we get, but I'll take it because that's the business that the money comes in. It's got to go to the players. But for the military, I think a lot of guys that go through the military and get beat up deserve to be taken care of for much longer as well. I mean, that's just my opinion on that.
And there's you've got the VA part of it and all sorts of things, and I've dealt with some of that stuff through buddies of mine and through working in the government as well. But yeah, the contracts have gone up a lot. I want to talk about that a little bit, because Brandon Ayuk is kind of in the news right now for his contract being voided. He seems a little confused about that fact, but that his contract is voided. This is kind of unprecedented territory for us here. So I want to talk about that a little bit before we get Jeremy Reisman on in the 8 o'clock hour. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Coming back here in studio with Shayne for a quick segment. I wanted to talk about this Brandon Ayuk thing, because as the money has gone up, there's different contingencies that happen on both sides of the contract. And obviously this is all a battle between that's why they have the collective bargaining agreement, as Shayne saw last week when I was holding my computer up to Big G and we were arguing over when the CBA actually ends for the current one. Doesn't matter for this particular segment, but it does matter for the players and for the teams, and they're on opposite sides for that part of it, and then kind of unite and obviously hope to get as much revenue in as they can overall, which that is not an issue for the NFL. That just continues to trend up basically under all circumstances. But now you've got kind of an unprecedented thing that's happening with Brandon Ayuk, who got signed to a big contract. He held in, I think was more accurate to his process, and then got a 4-year, $120 million deal. But because he didn't report to rehab, the 49ers were able to get the 2026 money voided. So now he's just kind of in this kind of strange abyss here, this purgatory where the 49ers don't have to play him. He doesn't count on as a roster spot. They're not paying him. but he's just kind of wasting away, and now he's using social media to attack the team, which doesn't seem to help his case of getting traded. I mean, because I get when players attack the team sometimes, or say they want to be traded, or make themselves an issue so they can get traded. But in this case, there's really not a lot of that. He doesn't have a lot of leverage in the situation.
Yeah, and he's definitely not making the case any better, because, now teams see kind of how his attitude is, and he needs to realize, like, hey, I get it. A team can cut you at any time. Who knows where the guaranteed money is, all that kind of stuff. But you're expected to live up to certain expectations, and they have clauses that are called conduct detrimental to the club. And it's laid out in such legal speak that they can be pretty definite about what they're claiming is conduct detrimental. And if you're not doing something that kind of helps you keep your status with the team, then why would they pay you? And I don't know all the details, but it sounds like if he's not in playing shape, if he's not going through his rehab and all that, then why do they want to have someone on contract that's a liability, and all of a sudden they're injured again, and they have to pay him, because you can't not pay a guy because they're injured. I'm pretty sure his contract does not have a split in it if he's got that kind of money in it. So they would have to pay him whatever the doctors until they clear him. And then, it kind of gets a little shady after that as far as like how it works. But them not wanting to be on the line for someone who's not going through the rehab, and that they don't get to oversee the rehab so that they know that he's doing it right. That's kind of a gray area that he should have been careful with. And I have a hard time kind of empathizing with him in that situation.
Well, especially because he kind of seems confused on multiple fronts. He's actually attacking the team and calling them dumb and stupid for signing him to that contract, which seems kind of counterintuitive, because you would think he would think that was smart to sign him to that money. But then he also commented on voiding the 2027 money, which isn't true. They voided the 2026 money, which is more pertinent. But yeah, it's an interesting battle, because all these battles happen on social media now too, which is wild to me to think of a player battling with a team over X or something like that.
It's funny. I guess, maybe someone within his camp, whether it's entourage, friend, family, I don't know, maybe believes that the court of public opinion matters. And there are cases. I mean, if I could talk about, Ray Rice, they knew what he did, but when the video came out, they're like, okay, we got to suspend him for the rest of the year. That was definitely something where they were worried about the optics and the, what it would look like if they didn't suspend him. But in situations like this, if he thinks that trying to get the public on his side is going to help, he's very, very wrong on that, because the fans are not going to sympathize with him and have any way to put any pressure on that team. They're not going to not show up because he's not there. I doubt he's their favorite player, so I doubt they're going to boycott. I doubt they have to worry about people not watching on TV, because the league doesn't care, because it's league-wide, it's not team-wide. And then it becomes an issue of, do other teams want a guy that has that kind of attitude as well?
Well, and you've always been good about kind of the relatability to the fan. This is not very relatable to a fan. And so that's going to be tough to grasp as they're in their, day job and all that. So it's an interesting situation. We'll be following that and the Sorsby situation and a lot of others. But we'll come back with Jeremy Reisman and talk some Lions after the break. We got to let Shayne go, but we'll talk to him next week, and we'll talk to Jeremy Reisman of Pride of Detroit about the Lions offseason so far. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Happy to bring on this next guest. Always happy when he can give us some time. He's one of the hardest working people in the Lions beat here. He's always putting out content, does great stuff at Pride of Detroit. He's been at OTAs. That's why we wanted to talk to him. But as you know, Jeremy, we do like to celebrate the thing of the day. And so it's National Corn on the Cob Day So I'm curious of your favorite way to have corn. If you even like corn, I have an alternative if you don't.
No, yeah, I'm a fan of corn. I would say I think I'm a fan off the cob. Don't cut it off. Don't like the corn ribs thing. I've never tried it, but it doesn't look appealing to me. I'm just an old classic. Stick the little things in the side and eat it right off the cob.
My preferred answer from you, I just thought of it as I was asking because you're the only guest on the show, so that you're the only one I get to ask. I really was hoping you'd say, I actually like to listen to it and go with the homonym of the band Korn that starts with a K.
Yeah. You know what? I did back in the day when I was in high school, listen to a little Korn.
So wait, were you a metalhead too? I know there's some other metalheads on the Lions beat.
I had a, what do they call it? New rock or new, I had a Family Values tour era of like middle school, high school, but it didn't last very long. And I wouldn't say I still have it. New metal rock is what they called it. But yeah, it was a phase in my life that I don't regret, but also I've moved on.
I was at one of the Family Values tours shows.
Were you?
Yes. I was there to basically accompany my younger cousin that really liked that type of music, and I was very confused. I was the oldest 16-year-old there as far I was listening to classic rock at the time, real old stuff. And so all these people were in the mosh pit pushing each other around, and yeah, that was an interesting one. I'm probably retired from that too. I wanted to be retired from it before I even went to it, but I did go to that one show. But yeah, it's I know there's a couple metalheads on the beat, so I was wondering, wait, okay, do we have an inordinate amount of metalheads on the Lions beat? Because when I do have a music related subject on the show, I always think with sports writers, it's usually Bruce Springsteen. That's the type of music that they like. Obviously, maybe older generation. Yeah. You're a little younger, but it's like if you talk to anybody in sports writing, they just like Springsteen. That's it.
Yes. Oh yeah. I feel like I see it all over sports Twitter. And some of the biggest writers, like you said, of kind of like the 80s and 90s, like they just it's catnip for them. I don't quite understand it either. Like I'm not a Springsteen hater necessarily, but I think I'm a generation too late.
And he was one of the bands that I did like and do like as far as classic rock goes and all of that. But like our other radio host on the station here, who's in his 50s, that's his outro song is Born to Run.
Oh, really?
Like it just,
there you go.
It's like if you're in sports radio or sports journalism, you gotta be a Springsteen fan. Otherwise you're out of the club, I guess. But
yeah, I guess so.
But no, we're happy to have you here, Jeremy. There's a lot of things going on. It's funny because one of the things that I wondered about when we greenlit this second show that was going to be all football, I thought, well, I don't know, is it going to get kind of dry in these weeks in the off season? But man, there's things going on every week, and you guys do a good job putting content out there. And I thought you had an interesting article that I kind of want to start with. We'll talk about OTAs too, but you had an article recently on Pride of Detroit Direct talking about kind of the snap share and where you see that going. And I thought that was a great article because I think that's the best way to take in this new team when people say, well, this person is here to replace this person. I don't think that's really the whole story, especially with maybe some schematic changes. But I thought that was a good article to show, okay, here's who we lost, here's how many snaps we lost, and here's how they could potentially be filled.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think looking back at last year's snaps does one of two things. One, it kind of shows you exactly what you just said. It's the kind of roles that might be available. Some might be filled by one player, some might be filled by a couple players. But it also goes to show you, like, it reminds you of what you lost and maybe what you thought you lost that you didn't actually lose. Because in a lot of ways, I went back and I looked at some of the snap counts from last year's, and there were some surprising numbers when it came to the Lions. There were some guys that I thought played a little bit more than I thought, and some guys that played a little bit less. Derek Barnes is kind of a perfect example. He's a guy who's expected to take over a lot of the roles that Alex Anzalone played last year when he signed with Tampa this offseason. Anzalone played about 1,000 snaps, but Derek Barnes played about 850. So he can't really take over a bunch of those snaps. He could probably, increase it a little bit if he plays all 17 games and barely comes off the field, but there's still like 800 snaps that the Lions are going to have to account for, whether that means someone else stepping up in the linebacker room, or as we've kind of heard more and more hints from the Lions coaching staff, maybe that means playing a little bit more nickel. And so part of Alex Anzalone's role actually gets usurped by a corner. And I think that's probably a good way to look at it, even though even that is probably only going to account for maybe an extra 200, 300. And then you probably have that third linebacker, who in this case is probably Malcolm Rodriguez, taking up another 400, 500 snaps. But I think that's kind of the perfect example of like looking back on last year's snap counts, looking at the changes this offseason, and delivering those snaps across several different positions and maybe several different players, because that's most likely how it's actually going to play out.
I feel like there's a couple of inflection points here with the defense, especially when you're talking about snap counts, because you hit on the Barnes thing already. I would be curious on your thoughts. Obviously, it's early in OTAs, but you've seen some schematic information here so far, but that'll change as they go on and as people get healthy and all of that, especially in the secondary. But I'm curious with the Barnes move, the possibility of maybe some of those linebacker snaps or kind of on the edge of the line there going more into a nickel category, and then also the defensive line alignment, I think, is another kind of hinge point for this team, because they have obviously depended pretty heavily on kind of those nose tackle style guys, but that's the position that I feel like if there's one position that they lost and didn't really replace in the same way, it's that one.
Yeah, and I'll start there because we did talk to Tyleik Williams a little bit today and kind of asked him, where do you kind of expect to play? Are you expected to play up and down the line like he kind of did during his rookie season? Part of that because I'm sure they were just trying to figure out what he does best. Part of that because they had so many injuries, and he actually said, like, no, I think, I am expected to play a little bit up and down, but I expect to play more nose this year. And obviously that was kind of like the main position that I think everyone looked at him as the best fit when he came out of college. But because, like I said, they didn't have Aleem McNeil for the first half of the season. They were dealing with some edge stuff. There's so much shaking up that I think he's going to settle in nicely in that nose tackle role and usurp some of the stuff that, like you said, got lost by the loss of DJ Reader, Roy Lopez. I think he's going to take a fair chunk of that. They're still going to have to find someone else, obviously, and Aleem McNeil can do a little bit of that, but maybe it's Jay Tufele, a free agent signing they made later. Aiden Kiana-Ina is this UDFA that, seems to fit the bill quite well and might be kind of the leader of the pack of one of those undrafted rookies that could make the team. But the one thing that I haven't noticed yet at OTAs is really a shift in focus on that defensive line in terms of alignment. A lot of it looks the same from what I saw last year in terms of the schematics. Like, obviously, there are going to be different people in different positions as the roster has changed, but not a ton has changed up front in what they've been normally doing schematically. And I think that's interesting because I thought maybe there'd be a little bit of change. Some of the guys that they targeted in the draft, late in the draft, free agency, I thought maybe it pointed to a little bit just less nose tackle and maybe some more three techs, maybe getting a different kind of player in the box. But so far it's looked relatively the same. But again, it is May, it's June. We're talking about pretty vanilla football stuff here. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Lions take the next month and a half to kind of revisit what they saw, what they liked, what they didn't like in OTAs, and maybe come out with something completely different in training camp.
I think those two pickups that you talked about, the Kanina in UDFA and Tufele, the fact that they added those guys kind of at the end of things indicated that they knew, okay, this is something that we haven't really reinforced a ton.
Yeah.
Because Lopez was a bit of a revelation for kind of what they got him for and how they found him. So I think they're hoping to find something similar in one of those two guys, maybe.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's probably a really good read on the situation because, they had gotten to the point where free agency was over, the draft was over, so let's go fill some of these remaining needs. And I think those two guys, like you said, I think both of them have a real good shot to maybe be the backup nose or at least get, 10-ish snaps a game at that position.
What else is sticking out to you at OTAs so far? Like you said, it's very early, but what else is kind of, what else are you keeping your eye on here so far?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the offensive line is something that is going to be critical to this team this year. There's not much you can take away in terms of like performance this time of year when, they're barely playing any full speed reps and obviously the pads aren't on yet. But I'm certainly paying attention to who's repping where, and obviously first-round pick Blake Miller is kind of the main attraction there. And the Lions are doing what they normally do, which is, let's put the veteran in there. Let's put Larry Borum in there to start and just slowly work our way to get Blake Miller more and more first-team reps. And, I would say today's practice is probably about 50-50, which has been a steady increase. So wouldn't be surprised, probably not the first day of training camp, but early in training camp that job becomes Blake Miller. And then I think there's been an expectation that the left guard position would be a camp battle, but it's almost exclusively been Christian Mahogany this spring. I do wonder if that will ramp up a little bit. Ben Barch is a veteran that they signed this offseason who's just been sidelined with an injury, for precautionary reasons. Miles Frazier, this is going to be his first offseason, so maybe he can work his way into the conversation as well. And then, just looking at the depth in general, they kind of really overhauled the entire depth of that group. And so it'll be interesting to see who kind of stays at the top of that depth chart. Once a pad gets on, which guys are delivering. And then obviously, you can't, even though I haven't been paying much attention to it because, I just have so much faith in Penei Sewell that his move to left tackle is not really, it doesn't even register much of a story to me because I don't think there's going to be any struggle. I don't think there's going to be much of an adjustment to a guy who played left tackle in college too. So, but it is probably something that you at least have to take a look at, see how it affects the rest of the offensive line, maybe see how it changes how the Lions, prioritize the side of the field in which they kind of run plays.
That will be interesting to watch, especially with the Barch situation, because I kind of thought that might be somebody that would appeal to them in camp, but he is one of those kind of discounts that Holmes tends to get from an injured player that if he plays, it could go pretty well, but the if is pretty big. Obviously, Davenport was kind of the biggest one in that category, and now has soured everybody on the whole process. But you can find some values there because I feel like Peyton Turner is the same way on the other side of the ball. That's a guy that he could factor into some of those edge snaps if something happens, per your kind of snap counts from last year.
Yeah, and he's been repping relatively early in the rotation so far in OTAs. And so I think that's one of the more interesting kind of not players that just haven't been talked about a lot with Peyton Turner. And I get why there's skepticism, or maybe people just aren't that interested in a player who hasn't been able to stay healthy and doesn't really have a lot of statistics to his name in a few years. But you are talking about a former first-round pick. You're talking about someone who has every bit of athleticism that you want out of the position. And, the Lions have turned around the careers of a couple edge players under this regime, whether it's, I don't want to say, I guess turned around their careers might be the wrong word, but at least had these kind of strong seasons, whether it's Al-Qadim Muhammad last year or, Charles Harris, or, in 2022, I want to say, another former first round pick who's, was a pretty big disappointment in his previous stops, but posted at least one really good season here in Detroit. So I think they're hoping they get something like that out of Peyton Turner, although they've made enough moves at the edge position this offseason by drafting Derek Moore, by adding DJ Wanham, that, even if he can't make his way into the starting lineup or into the rotation, that they're going to be okay there. But like you said, given everything about this team's makeup and the salary cap, they're pretty much in a position here where you have to take some swings like this and hope that you hit on one or two of them.
Exactly. And they have been good at identifying some of these folks. Like you said, that you named a couple of the edge candidates. Muhammad is still a great find. I mean, I feel like I've said this on the show a lot of times, but I feel like nobody properly knew his age because he kind of came out of nowhere, and then it was like, oh, well, we got to re-sign him. He's still in his prime, and it's like, well, he's 31 though now. Like, wait, is he? It's like, yeah, he was a little late to the game there.
Yeah, not a lot of breakout seasons happen when you're 30, 31 in the NFL, but it's a cool story for him. But I think you're right. Like the Lions wanted to obviously get younger on defense, and they wanted to stay relatively cheap, and Al-Qadina Muhammad just kind of didn't fit either of those plans.
No, I'm like you said, he's a great story. I'm happy for him, and it'll be interesting to see how they do in Tampa in general, because they got some former Lions there, kind of a similar outlook for them, and similar pieces that they go for there. But it'll be interesting to see. We got to take a quick break, but we're going to come back with Jeremy, and I want to ask him about another. It was actually a post, I think, on X that he had recently talking about aggregation and AI in sports. And I think that's an interesting subject to talk about. So we'll come back with Jeremy Reisman of Pride of Detroit. Stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Jeremy Reisman, having a good conversation about the Lions. But you hit on a point, Jeremy, with one of your tweets that I saw recently that I found interesting about kind of aggregation and AI in sports that I've been wondering about for a little while, because in my other business there's a lot of predisposition to AI, and I've been kind of a late adopter, I think, for some of those things. But I think part of it is because I'm so used to doing the show and doing other things that are so relational, and that I value the people and the relationships, and that's part of the reason that we have so many people from the Lions beat on the show and advertise your stuff and all of that, because I want people to read the byline of all this work that you guys are putting into things. And with some of the things that are happening, there is no byline.
Right.
With what's going on. So I thought that was interesting that you pointed that out, because you get aggregated. You're one of the prime writers on the Lions beat, and that happens, and that's not fair. They need to give you an attribution. But I'm just curious how you kind of take all this in, because it is changing at a rapid rate here.
Yeah, I mean, like as you just said there, like it's all happening so fast that it's a little bit hard to keep up and know what's next. And that's the scary thing about. Really, I don't want to just make it sound like I'm, playing my own little violin here, because so many jobs and professions are potentially going to be affected by AI. But yeah, from my point of view, some of it is something that's just been happening, like you said, with aggregation in general, whether it's, Twitter accounts that, take your quotes or your photos without attribution, or, websites that do stuff similar. And it's something that you just, I don't want to say become numb to, but a lot of that sort of stuff is just kind of out of your hands. And on one hand, maybe you take a little solace in knowing that, like, you're sending out valuable information, valuable analysis, valuable quotes, whatever. At the very base of it all, like, AI can't produce that content, right? They can't take photos from practice. They can't, ask interview questions in press conferences and things like that. And so there will always be room for that in this industry. It's on me, I guess, to make it so that the work that I do is valuable enough to get aggregated. And even if, some of that aggregation isn't necessarily compensating me in ways that I feel like make sense, there's a lot of that going around, right? Like music artists and the way that streaming has happened has really hurt the bottom line for a bunch of people in the music industry. You just kind of have to find ways around it. And, I think the media industry is starting to find ways to do that. Like you said, you do a great job to kind of put a megaphone to the voices of actual human work, and then you just kind of hope that you build up a good enough reputation so that, as we've seen with a lot of writers in a lot of industries, sometimes you just go independent, and people will pay for really good content knowing that it's coming from a real source, knowing that it's coming from a trusted source that doesn't exaggerate or clickbait or any of those things. We have a little bit of that with Pride of Detroit, as you mentioned, with Pride of Detroit Direct. I don't suspect that I'm going independent anytime soon, but like that certainly has to be in the back of, I think, most writers' minds in this business, just because there has to be a way to monetize your own work when these aggregators or AI bots come to steal your work, and if your stuff is behind a paywall, they can find ways to make it public and all that sort of stuff. And so you have to build a community. You have to build a fan group of people that trust you, and hope that's enough to carry you. And I don't know if it is. I don't know if it isn't. But it's a really interesting time for everybody, I would say.
Well, there's proof of concept, at least on the Lions beat, of that a little bit, because there was somebody that did that looked like they were taking a big leap at the time, and it's gone pretty well. And even, I mean, I feel like even Brad Galley's doing that on the kind of network TV side of things. Yeah,
Brad, a good friend of mine, took a pretty big jump from network TV on ABC to just kind of go his own on making a YouTube channel. And, he's done years and years of really great work and made really good connections. Like you said, the person-to-person business of this. And now, he's going to try to, make things work independently. And part of that protects yourself a little bit from the AI industry. I know for him, a lot of it had to do with just making sure there was a work-life balance in his life. He's got kids, he's got a wife that he wants to spend more time with, and that has to be part of it too. And it's something that I always think of as well. You gave me a very nice compliment at the top of the show, saying one of the hardest working people in this business, and sometimes I wear that as a badge of honor. Sometimes I wear that as a little bit of shame, because I do want to make sure that I'm doing enough to fill my cup beyond my job. So independence kind of gives you that sort of freedom. And, I'm also not saying that my current job makes me work a ton of hours. A lot of that stuff is my own decision, because I care about the work too. But it's just, there are a lot of moving parts in this business, and a lot of different outlets, and a lot of people trying a lot of different things. And I commend all the people who are trying something different. It's a big leap to make. With a lot of these big businesses that you're looking for, they have great benefits. They have a little bit of stability to them. But I imagine there's nothing like being your own boss, setting your own hours, and kind of being your own creative director as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you'd be able to kind of call your own shot. And like you said, that's still, you need to build up to that. But I can see why that would appeal to people. But it's a concept that's kind of near and dear to me, because like you said, and I appreciate that, but, putting you guys on and giving you guys the opportunity. But I saw it a lot through the draft process, because I talked to some people on the national side of things, guys that I know, guys that I trust, but they're covering all 32 teams. It's tough to know all those teams intimately, and then you just see the difference in the reporting, even because that I had this conversation with Eric, but you saw the difference in, okay, wait a minute, why does the national side of the beat, everybody's leaning kind of to Caden Proctor, and then the local side of the beat, all you guys there was a lot more Blake Miller, there's some Monroe Freeling mixed in, but there wasn't a lot of Caden Proctor. And I was like, man, this is a big difference, I think, here. And I have my own theories on that, especially given my intelligence background. I think Holmes was trying to implement some of that, because if you can't conceal information, then the next best option is misinformation. So so he was playing that game, but you just noticed that. And I always do emphasize to people, even when people send things to me, send me articles on the Lions, or hey, did you see this? I'll say, usually I'll know, especially if it's the outfit or whatever. But if they tell me they read something somewhere, I'll ask. My first question is, who wrote it? And then I will give them an opinion after that.
Yeah, no, I think that's something I still try to do, even though I'm in the business. I still am a Detroit Lions fan by heart. I still read a lot of Lions content that isn't my own, and I try to make sure that the people that I enjoy, that the people that I trust, I promote their stuff, and I raise their voices, because I want the Lions fan base to be smarter. I want them to be more engaged. I want them to make sure that the information they're getting is accurate, whether it's from me or someone else I trust. And so that's something that I think is just really important, that I highlight people that I respect, in a business where, like, there's a lot of people that try to make it in this business. Some do it the right way, some do it the wrong way. And rather than focus my attention on the people that do it the wrong way, which I'll admit in my younger years was something that I probably did a little bit too much. I rather kind of raise the voices of the people I trust. So I'm glad you do that here with your show and getting good guests. And I think it's also important on a very personal level, like you said, to, if people are sending you articles saying, hey, can I trust this guy? Being like, yes, you can, or no, hey, trust this person better. This is the person you should be reading.
Exactly. I'll happily redirect them as I often do to your stuff, which we need to advertise, and also on the way out. One of the things that I saw about OTAs today is they had a punt competition at the end, and it made me think of, was it you or Ryan that had to do the punt, had to receive punts from Jack Fox? I'm curious.
Yeah, that was me.
Okay, so I don't think I ever heard how that went, and make sure to advertise Pride of Detroit for sure here.
Yeah. That was part of our Movember campaign where we raise money for a charity during the month of November. And I grow out a mustache. And then, every time we hit a certain level, so like 5,000, 10,000, we try to do something silly or fun. And that year, one of the goals was for me to try to catch punts from Jack Fox. And I want to say I caught maybe 2 out of 4, 2 out of 5. The first one I dropped. Second one, I think I had to run a little bit too far, didn't get there. And then I think I caught 2 in a row. And then the third one, or the last one, I think he purposely just booted it way over my head. But it was fun. The Lions were really cool about it. They made me put on a helmet. Their equipment manager even fitted me for a helmet and all that. They took photos and video of it. It's up on our YouTube page somewhere in the depths of that. So that's really fun. But in terms of our websites, prideofdetroit.com, part of the SB Nation network. You can find us pretty much on any social. We do live streaming podcasts on Twitch and YouTube. All you have to do is search Pride of Detroit. And if you are looking for some extra bonus Lions content, we do have a premium newsletter called Pride of Detroit Direct, where we'll have exclusive podcasts, daily recaps of practices, some kind of more in-depth articles like you were talking about with the snap count stuff. And so you can go to prideofdetroit.com/subscribe if you're interested in that.
Be sure to follow these guys. They've got great stuff, as we discussed, and as you can see by the interview. But appreciate your time. Want to be respectful of it per our conversation, so you have a little bit more balance here. But appreciate you giving us the time, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Sounds good, Ryan. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy. Talk to you again. Thanks to Jeremy Reisman. Appreciate him coming on. Yeah, he does great stuff. So be sure to keep an eye on Pride of Detroit and all the work they're doing. We'll have more folks from Pride of Detroit on because we cycle a lot of them through. But we're going to talk to Aaron in studio. We haven't talked to him yet, so we'll talk to him after the break. Stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM /Encore Auctions. Aaron, we're going to change that read here as we go, but Encore Business Group is launching an auction house for memorabilia items here, and that'll be coming out in late July, early August, hopefully for the first auction there. But they'll have sports memorabilia, cards, game used stuff. There's some players that will be partnering with us, and so we'll have some decent memorabilia for people to collect from the auctions here, which should be fun. We'll be talking about that more on the show because Shayne, who had to leave, he has a massive memorabilia collection, so I think he'll want to talk more about memorabilia here. But yeah, we've got some good pieces. We've got an Indiana championship ring that will be in the auction. So the college football championship, with the diamond studded ring, that'll be in the auction. That's, I think, the first to market for something like that. Well, it's certainly the first Indiana ring to market because there hasn't been any before this. So there will be some interesting stuff in there for those collectors out there. And we've been trying to cycle more memorabilia stuff through since that's technically my background. But it should be good here. But I'm curious. So we didn't get to ask you about the corn thing. So what's your favorite way of having corn?
I'm gonna go with corn on the cob. It's more of a nostalgic thing, just from like camping and stuff. We've always done like corn on the cob. So
that's a good one. Yeah, you can't knock that. Have you heard of elote? I asked Shayne this, but it's like a Mexican street corn, which is like corn on the cob and it's grilled, but it's got like other spices and sauces and stuff on it.
I think I've had it probably
at
some point.
They're now making it into a dip. You might see it as a dip on some menus, where it's like corn and cheese and different things. But yeah, it's basically like a mayonnaise or sour cream spread on it, and then queso fresco and tahini. There's a bunch of different things on there, but that's pretty good. That's just basically like souped up corn on the cob.
Yeah, no, that sounds interesting. Well, I was gonna say on this, it also says German chocolate cake. Was that the other?
That was
option?
the other option. Yeah, we were. I figured we'd just focus on that one on the corn with just Shayne in studio because he doesn't eat a lot of sweets. So I figured that would be a tough one. But I do like German chocolate cake. If we had more guests, I might have gone favorite cake. So we can also do that.
Yeah, no, it's so like I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, but my family's. Especially like my dad, he's big on German chocolate cake. I absolutely hate it. It looks disgusting to me.
Well, have you you said it looks disgusting. Have you had it?
Yeah, I actually had it recently, and I can't.
What is it? Is it the coconut?
It's the coconut
Okay.
for me. I'm not a huge, even though like I'll drink Body Armor, which is like a coconut water, but it doesn't really taste like it. But like anything coconut for me is like a no-go.
So this is definitely not a good category for me as far as energy drinks go, but this is a good one for you. You are currently wearing a Body Armor shirt right now. So that's coconut water, the Body Armor?
Yeah. Then there's been a few flavors, and I think they've discontinued them that were like we had like a pineapple coconut flavored one.
Okay.
And I tried that because, when they were trying to clear it out of the warehouse, they gave some to a lot of the employees, and I happened to get some, and I took one sip of it, and I was like, "This is disgusting." And then I gave it away to like some friends.
you realized why they were clearing it out of the warehouse at that point in time.
Oh yeah, it wasn't popular. And I knew that.
That's interesting. That's one thing that I have not had. I've never had any kind of energy drink. I've never had a Red Bull, a Monster, a Body Armor, and I guess that's kind of more in the Gatorade category, but I just haven't had any of those things. I've had a Gatorade, I guess, back in the day.
Yeah, and I probably drink way too many energy drinks, but Reign, that's probably my go-to, just because it has branched chain amino acids in it, has creatine in it, also has potassium in it, which, many of the energy drinks try to, they dehydrate you a little bit. So I feel like that one doesn't do it as much with all the stuff that's in it.
Yeah, those are real things that people use as supplements for, weightlifting. I'm familiar with the creatine thing, and amino acids. People try to load those up for bodybuilding and weightlifting and stuff.
And then it's also 300 milligrams of caffeine, so it's a little bit stronger than like a Monster or probably even a Red Bull. I actually don't know off the top of my head how much caffeine's in a Red Bull, but probably a lot.
I've never even looked at it. The fact that it's a fairly small can concerns me because I feel like there's a lot that's contained in that little can.
Yeah, and it's just, for me, they're overpriced compared to like Monster or Reign, because like they'll have these like 8-ounce cans that are like the same price of like a Monster 16-ounce can, and they're both the same price, and it's 8 ounces smaller, and it's like one sip and it's gone. I don't know. I can't get behind Red Bull. I think they're overpriced, but I know I got friends and family that drink Red Bull.
I mean, we're probably not getting them as a sponsor anyway, so I'm not too worried about it.
Going down that road.
Well, no, I mean, I do try to use all of the sponsors on the show so that they're things that I can recommend, and that I wouldn't use. I wouldn't be able to use. I remember somebody offering me a Red Bull and vodka at one point in time, and I thought to myself, that would probably stop my heart. I haven't had either of those things in my lifetime, an alcoholic drink or an energy drink.
Yeah.
So the combination, you just better get the ambulance ready.
Yeah. I think I've probably tried it once, but yeah, alcohol and energy drinks. That's a dangerous game.
It seems like a weird combo to me, but I know people drink them and to each their own with that kind of thing. But yeah, you're the energy drink. The whoever is sitting in the producer chair is typically the energy drink specialist, because a few of you guys see, this is what happens in the studio. I make everybody so sleepy with me droning on the show that the producer has to kind of have an energy drink, if I could say it. I don't drink them, so I can't say it, on hand.
Yeah, no, it's just long days, man. I was gonna say, man, because I was late to the studio today. I didn't get a drink, whether it's an energy drink or soda or sports drink at all. So I'm like, feel weird without having one.
Well, we did not tell the audience that. I just put us on air.
I had to.
And we just powered through. I have remedial training on the board. So I got Shayne and I on, and as you notice, Mom's not in studio with us like she normally is. And so I was my way of confirming that we were on the air, because you can be talking into mics, but that doesn't mean anybody's listening. I was literally texting her, "Hey, are we on air?" And we made it. We got on air.
You guys sounded good, because as soon as I hopped in the car to drive over here, I was listening on the way here. I was like, doesn't sound bad at all.
I couldn't figure out the whole boom mic situation. I had to hold it up over there, but yeah, we made it through. This, you got to cover each other in different ways here, so that's okay. You had a lot going on. I think were you at football practice?
Yeah, we had football practice from 4 to 6. I stayed around talking to some of the players and one of the coaches, just because for numbers' sake. Obviously, it's tough to get kids to come out during the summer, so we were trying to figure out names, numbers, all that stuff to try to get them to show up to practice. And it was weird, because I was in studio with Steve yesterday and didn't come to think of it, I was going to have it back-to-back days, even though it's schedule's right there on my phone. And got home, and about like 7:03, Scott's calling me, and I was like, "Oh, that's weird. Why is he calling me?" And then I was like, "Oh crap, it's Thursday."
Well, what I was going to say, why are we having football practice on June 11th? That seems like a little early to me.
Yeah, no, and it's just things are different, and it was funny too, because it's and I'm sure a lot of the parents will have that same concern, and I get it though too, because as kids, you want to enjoy your summer. I know from when I played, and granted things were different back then. Usually June, may take a week off after school, but then it's weightlifting and conditioning, so it's so we'll have that throughout the year, up until like the 4th of July, and then you have the team camps. And then you have 7-on-7, stuff like that. Which all this, by the way, the practice and stuff is legal. I had to clarify that. I was thinking of that the other day.
I wasn't questioning that part of it.
I just wanted to clarify that, though, too, because I was like, it's within the rules. It's within the rules. We're not the only ones, but I had to clarify.
Call off my friends at the GRPD.
Yeah,
don't
hopefully
don't
no
do
one
anything there. Yeah.
related to football is listening.
No, it is. I was saying that tongue in cheek, because it is perfectly normal to have football practice through the summer now. I've watched that with my nephew, who plays in high school right now. But I remember the two-a-days when I was playing football, but that was kind of in the few weeks preceding the year. You would do the two-a-days to get kind of into condition, into shape for the year. But yeah, I mean, all these sports, it's not just football, they're year-round now. They're travel sports or AAU. If it's basketball, it doesn't matter. Sports are year-round, and it is interesting to see what that's going to produce. Like, if that's what the younger generation is used to, what does that produce as an adult? That's what I'm curious of, like, with the prevalence of this, because I played a lot of sports, but I played very few organized sports. I did when I was younger, but I wasn't good at really any of them. I played 2 years of football in high school, and then I just played a lot of sports, played outside, did a lot of unstructured activities, and I think that led to me being a certain way as an adult. And so being in all of those organized activities as a kid, I'm curious how that's going to affect people. Like, hey, I was in organized activities all the way through high school, college, and now I'm a free man. Now what do I do?
Yeah, that's I don't know. I mean, I played 4 different sports in high school. So you kind of get used to the busy schedule, which, preps you for college. It doesn't get easier. And then obviously when you get into adulthood and having to work and show up on time, I'm like,
hey,
but
you got us to break. That's the key.
We made it through.
That part I would have had a tough time doing. I would have I don't know what I would have played. I would have tried to play maybe Enya, which I always joke with Jeff that I'm going to request Enya on a Saturday all request show.
Yeah, no, and I was trying to GPS trying to figure out the time, and I was like, I'll probably get here at 7:22, right? And I was like, well, it'll be a long intro, but then we'll make up for it with the breaks and the commercials and stuff. So we'll figure it out.
We're all caught up, and this is going to be our last break that we're going to take right now. So stick with us. We'll come back and preview the Jethro lineup and talk about some of the other sports going on. Stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM.
This is Ryan Walsh. If you're hurting or feeling sick but can't figure out what's wrong, and you've been everywhere only to be told there's nothing wrong, do what I did. Go to Williams Chiropractic and Internal Health Center, where they work to find the root cause of your struggles. Using revolutionary techniques and holistic practices, they assess physical, internal, and mental health. Williams Chiropractic and Internal Health Center is a complete solution, not just an adjustment. If you're ready to live life to the fullest, go see Dr. Williams. For more information, go to williamschiropracticgr.com.
Expect the unexpected.
May I have your attention, please?
Country with a twist. Jethro FM.
Extra Points is presented by Eric Hull DDS, Aesthetic and General Dentistry in Comstock Park. Dr. Hull and his team want to make your dental experience as enjoyable as possible. So they offer special perks like warm neck cushions, massaging chairs, and warm blankets. Who knows, you might even start looking forward to dental appointments. Call for an appointment at 616-784-2377. That's Eric Hull DDS, located just off Alpine Avenue in Comstock Park, and online at greatmismiles.com.
Welcome back to Shayne Graham's Extra Points with Ryan Walsh, presented by Encore Business Group. Coming back here in studio with Aaron here. We were talking a little bit in the break. We mostly talk football on the show, but I've been caught up watching the finals here with both the NBA and the NHL, and I was telling Aaron that this might be the best set. I know they don't have the Detroit teams, and I know people are sad about that, but this might be the best set of finals that we've had at the same time, because the NHL finals and the NBA finals have coincided for a while now. This might be the best set of finals. This matchup between the Golden Knights and the Hurricanes on the NHL side has been crazy. They're going into double overtime. There's pucks bouncing off the boards and the half wall and bouncing in, and it is just pure chaos. And it's such a frenetic pace for the Stanley Cup Finals. And then you add in kind of the old guard of the New York Knicks versus the young San Antonio Spurs with the next generation of players, but you got Madison Square Garden in the mix. And between all that, I feel like this is a fun time to be watching. I know people, once their team goes out, sometimes they just stop paying attention, but it's worth tuning into these games, I think.
Yeah, I can't say much about like the NHL. I'm not a huge hockey guy, but at least as far as the NBA finals goes, I mean, I follow it now. I mean, as now that the Pistons were out, it's don't keep up on it as much. But I was looking into it, and I think it was a come from behind victory for the Knicks last night, I believe.
The largest comeback in NBA Finals history. That's why I wanted. That's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it, because people. It's funny because I was having this conversation with a friend of mine who immediately, as it was happening, he was talking about, we got to investigate De'Aaron Fox, because De'Aaron Fox, the point guard for the Spurs, had kind of a rough sequence in the fourth quarter where he got blocked and then didn't guard the inbounder OG Anunoby, who then tipped in. I mean, this I don't know if you saw that tip at the end, Aaron, but that's going to be. You're going to be seeing that for years. That's going to be one of the iconic plays
in NBA history. He's the inbounder. He cuts through the middle of the Spurs defense. Jalen Brunson misses what appears to be the last shot of the game to lose the game, and he cuts through, and in the midst of the Spurs players, he tips it up and cleanly tips it in to win the game. And it was amazing. It's that picture is going to be everywhere. You're definitely going to see it because it's going to be everywhere here in the magazines and different video clips of it. But it's an interesting series. They haven't really held serve much at home. That was the first. That was a win at Madison Square Garden for the Knicks, but up until that point, a team hadn't won at home. The Knicks won the 2 games in San Antonio, and then San Antonio won the 3rd game at Madison Square Garden. Now they're going back to San Antonio, so it'll be interesting to see how they do. They're a very young team, and they're kind of showing it. The Knicks have a little bit more of a veteran presence, and then that MSG was crazy because they had a lot of celebrities there, but they were all you could tell how surprised they were because that final sequence you couldn't have predicted that. You couldn't have written that better than it actually played out.
Yeah, I feel bad for San Antonio, but I mean, for at least with them, I mean they're so young. I mean they still got plenty of years to get back to the finals, but to me, at least, the Knicks, I think, have won the series. I think that game kind of was the thing that is going to push them over it.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, 3-1 is a commanding lead in the finals, so usually that means that I forget what the percentage is, but it's somewhere near 80% or something like that they ended up winning. But that's been a fun finals, and I know you haven't been watching the NHL, but they're worth watching because it's been a crazy matchup. I know there's probably not a lot of people in this market that care about the Carolina Hurricanes or the Las Vegas Golden Knights, although that's a cool name. That's one of the better names, I feel like, the Golden Knights. But they've had an unbelievable matchup. They're, I think, matching up right now, so that game's probably going on. So it's worth tuning into. This is the game 5. They're locked in at 2-2, but I'd tune into both of those series if you're not a baseball fan, because baseball is the only other thing kind of going on in town here for Tigers fans and for Detroit fans, but that's been going a lot better now. It's funny what a difference a couple weeks can make here with what's been going on with the Tigers. They've now won 2 series in a row, and now they have a bunch of matchups. They have a matchup with the Guardians and then the White Sox, so they could change the fortunes of the division here in the next couple weeks and the rest of the month, because man, May did not work out very well for them, but the way that they're trending in June, they could have the largest month-over-month improvement in the history of their franchise. So that would be pretty interesting to see. But I always try to tell people this, Aaron, because it's never you don't want to grade yourself too much when you're kind of on that high. You're never as high as your highest high, and you're never as low as your lowest low. And I feel like people were really getting mad during that low month for the Tigers, but now they're kind of back, and now everybody's forgetting about that. How quickly we forget about these things.
Yeah, I mean, at least with the Tigers though too, it's just I don't know, towards the long season.
It is. It's a very up and down, and it's all trend based. It's all there's a lot of momentum from very small things that happen in baseball, and it can take you on the upward trend or on the downward trend.
Yeah, and I just think it's always going to come down to whoever's hot closer to the playoffs, and that usually kind of catapults them into World Series.
Oh, that's what baseball comes down to. It's not. I would say, well, I can't say it's rarely the best team, but it's always the hottest team.
Yep, it's not always the best.
Yeah.
It's the hottest team at the time.
Yeah, and it can be both at the same time, because the best team can be the hottest.
Yep.
But man, I remember that in 2012 when I went to the Tigers World Series and they played against the Giants, and I remember just thinking they don't have it. They were so hot, the Giants were, and the Tigers were not. They were so cold at the time.
You know what's funny? I was like, and I'm not even like that huge of a baseball person, even though I like played it, since I was younger throughout high school too. But I was actually kind of in that World Series. I was actually a San Francisco Giants fan, even though I also like the Tigers. I'm a huge fan of pitching, and at the time they had Barry Zito, Tim Lincecum.
Yeah.
So I was big on like teams that have good pitching, and I always felt like they always had the edge over the Tigers when it came to that. And that it was never really even a huge fan of Miguel Cabrera. I know that's kind of a hot take, but it was crazy to think. And that I'm trying to remember what game it was, but it was the last pitch of that, and I was thinking, they were going to pitch around Cabrera on that last one. He had 2 strikes on him, and I think it was Sergio Romo, I believe, was the closer, and it just, if they want to say the count was 1-2, and just fastball right down the middle, got him, and I was not expecting. I was like, he's going to pitch around him or whatever, try to get him swinging. Nope, just right down Broadway, and I was like, man, crazy.
That's kind of how that series felt as a whole. It just, I remember thinking, and at the time I was very happy to go to the World Series. That was a big thing for me at the time. I'd gone to the 2006 World Series a couple games as well, but it's always cool when you get to go to a championship, your team goes to a championship. But I remember thinking, this is not their year, and there's so many things that factor in, but they were not the hottest team. You could argue that they were the better team, but they weren't the better team at that time.
Yeah, and that was the thing too, because it was I believe it was kind of a similar situation with San Fran, where it was they weren't the best team at the time, and I want to say they probably were a wild card team or barely got in. I'm trying to remember, it felt like it was so long ago, but they weren't definitely not the best team out of the NL, but they had good pitching. And I feel like towards in the playoffs, that matters a little bit more than being the better team or being the better offensive team.
Especially because it is so trend-based. You don't necessarily, if the bats aren't hot, it doesn't matter if it's a Miguel Cabrera style, generational hitter. If he's cold, there's nothing really you can do about that. Whereas with pitching, that does have a tendency to travel a little bit better, where they've got more control over the situation. Really, the pitchers do, and I mean, big league hitters always adjust and all of that, but the pitchers know what they're going to throw, obviously, and if they've got good command down the stretch and they're feeling good, then yeah, good pitching is tough to beat. But yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting with the Tigers, because they do have some good arms in that clubhouse, and now they're coming back. Scooble's going to be back here, it looks like, the next series, and so yeah, things are trending their way after kind of a rough May. So we'll see how they do. But appreciate you tuning in and celebrating Corn on the Cob Day and German Chocolate Cake Day with us here, and appreciate Jeremy Reisman coming on and talking about the Lions, and had a good conversation with Shayne about the legalities surrounding football. Appreciate Ron for coming just in time to keep us on track here, because I would not have trusted myself to put us into a break. But yeah, make sure to tune into the rest of the Jethro lineup. You've got the Saturday lineup. Obviously tomorrow you've got Conrad's Country Bunker in the morning and early afternoon, and then Rowdy Yates in the late afternoon, early evening, Rowdy's Ride Home. Then Saturday you've got the Morning Grind. You've got the Sports Project from 10 to 12 with the sports professor who just had a birthday. Did you realize, Aaron, that Steve is actually younger than me? Did you realize that? Because he celebrated his 39th birthday, and I'm 43. So yeah, happy birthday again to the sports professor, the young man, the sports professor. He'll be on 10 to 12 on Saturday, and 7 to 9 on Wednesday. And then we've got Polka Pops all weekend with MLB and the rest of the folks, and then the All Request Show with Jeff Isaac. Then Sports Intel on Monday, 7 to 9 p.m. And then we'll be back next week, 7 to 9. So until then, thanks for kicking it with us, and have a great week.
This episode is brought to you by Encore Business Group, Eric Hall Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Williams Chiropractic, Elite Winning Solutions, and Sal's Complete Home Painting and Handyman Services. Shayne Graham's Extra Points with Ron Walsh airs live Thursdays, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern on Jethro.fm.